Hi guys, today I'm going to be doing a video on Kenya's economy. Kenya is often called the Silicon Savannah, a rising economic powerhouse. But if you look at the data, the country has been fighting an uphill battle since the very first day of independence. From colonial era debt traps to the resource curse that isn't actually about resources.
Imagine Singapore was like Kenya 60 years ago. Singapore and Kenya were the same countries 60 years ago. Because we can see in Singapore what right decisions can make of a country.
Unaambiwa hii Kenya inaenda kukua kama Singapore. Mumesikia maneno ya Singapore nyinyi? Mumesikia mambo ya Singapore nyinyi? Lakini yule ambaye anatuambia mambo ya Singapore, yeye mwenyewe anakejeli viongozi wengine akiwaambia ati wamekuwa kwa uongozi miaka 40 na hawajajenga barabara ya kwenda kwao. Mimi nataka nimwambie Mheshimiwa William Ruto, uongozi ambao tunataka Kenya hii si uongozi ambao wewe ukiingia kwa mamlaka unajifikia.
Why was Kenya's economy seemingly rigged from the start? Let's dive into the history that the textbooks often gloss over. We have had comparisons to Singapore, and though these comparisons are outlandish, I think with the right leadership, proper structuring, transparency, and corruption-free economic environments, we can easily get there. Inherited structures. The research paper I'm looking at examines the evolution of Kenya's wealth distribution from the late 1950s to the present day, focusing on how colonial legacies shaped the inequality patterns. The study addresses a key question: to what extent did settler colonialism, which involved land appropriation and the introduction of private property rights that post-colonial elites retain, explain Kenya's inequality trajectory? Using previously tapped probate and administration records, the paper measures the share of Kenya's living estates at death and tracks how this wealth-owning class changed over time. The research reveals that after independence, African estates grew significantly. By the 1980s, approximately 8% of Kenyans left estates at death, largely due to land titling and land reform, while European estates declined as settlers divested. Since the 1990s, Nairobi's best estate holders have grown in share, reflecting the increasing importance of urban property wealth portfolios. Basically, instead of the white man being the landlord, now it's a little bit richer Kenyans buying a house or two, renting them out, and becoming landlords. To this day, they trick themselves that they own capital, when really they're 9-to-5 workers just like the rest of us, but with a Gucci belt. The findings show high wealth inequality in both late colonial period and the present, though contemporary inequality is driven more by uneven distribution of housing wealth than agricultural land, illustrating how various colonial legacies influenced wealth accumulation in post-colonial Kenya. So basically nowadays, owning and renting a house will get you more money than the average farmer. So the average landlord is making more than the average farmer. So we've taken a shift from producing what we need on the day-to-day basis to bullshit like real estate. This is what capitalism is. It's making a bunch of bullshit jobs, from something that we need daily like food to managing property. How is a basic right like shelter costing people an arm and a leg just to afford? We now have a bunch of scam lords providing nothing to society but a title deed property. They've only stepped in these houses once, and these are the people that are celebrated as winners. People often look up to them with inspiration. They tell us that we should become like them. I have one question: when they die after becoming multimillionaires, what will they have contributed to society? Because I know we will miss doctors, engineers, and social workers who make our lives easier and better, but yet they are not celebrated. Even in the medicine department, people only go there to enrich themselves rather than helping the sick. So some doctors are just capitalists. They're in it for the money and the glory.
Less than 10 years after Kenya was declared a British protectorate, we experienced the first large-scale drought in Kenya. Before the British protectorate was established, Kenya had been under a private company that had a royal charter to come and exploit Kenya. It is the same thing that they are doing with carbon credits. Somebody gets a royal charter, signs it with World Bank, and comes to exploit our economy. Things change, but they've remained the same. So,
historical background. The British East African Company was granted a charter in 1888, leading to the colonization of present-day Kenya, Uganda, and Tanzania, which all became British colonies in the 1920s. The colonial government implemented policies that forced Kenyans onto less fertile land, created a system of forced labor, and introduced taxes to ensure a cheap labor force for European settlers. The 1913 Land Bill granted white settlers 1,000-year leases on land, effectively treating a monopoly on land use, while the Kipande system required all Kenyan men to wear identity discs to restrict movement. The colonial administration also used a system to divide and conquer, which we know as tribalism. They weaponized tribalism against us. So as you fight saying your tribe is better than the other, the white man doesn't see a difference at all. He sees two groups of niggers fighting and a way to make money. This divide and conquer strategy contributed to the Mau Mau uprising, a rebellion primarily led by the Kikuyus against the British colonial rule and settler dominance. I don't have to talk about what happened in this rebellion because, again, I'll get emotional. YouTube won't like the details of this reunion, but for the people who don't read history, this rebellion had the torture and mass incarceration of over 1 million Kenyans. They were put in concentration camps and over 100,000 of them died. The rebellion succeeded at first, but now, after the rebellion, what was done to the surviving Mau Mau? I can comfortably say that the rebellion failed. We don't have freedom, democracy, rights, or a fair justice system. The colonial system was designed to benefit European settlers at the expense of Kenyans, and this legacy of inequality has persisted into the present post-colonial era. So again, I'll ask the question, are we really independent? From what I've seen, we're not free in religion, education, and economic systems. The white man lives on in our brains, and in our country, to this day, he has taken on a different form, the black capitalist.
So today, let us look at this cycle of exploitation in Africa so you can see where we are at, why Kenya suddenly moved from having no paupers, because the report was that there was not a single pauper in Africa, to now where we have famine right in this moment in the year 2026. So that the problems of 1926 seem to be repeating themselves in intensity. And this now seems to become the norm of our society, a society where this was not normal. So let's explore the elements of tribes that were used. I'm going to work with 4 tribes today. I'm introducing the Somali into this conversation. So we have the Somali, we have the Akikuyu, we have the Maasai, and we have the Akamba. These are the 4 because they also represent the ethno-profiling that was used. The Somali being martial, the Maasai being warrior and land. These ones, the Kikuyu being agricultural and the Kamba being commercial.
The economy. We're going to be looking at recent studies of Kenya's economy. These studies find strong negative links between debt to GDP ratio and economic stability. The model explains that 72% of variation in stability and the estimated effect is large. So when debt to GDP ratio increases, the quality of life decreases. Higher debt means more revenue diverted to interest and repayments, which means less money for health, education, agricultural, and other basic branches of the government. These branches of the government are vital to the growth of the country and the economy. So when you take on more debt, it will hurt the economy by slowing growth to vital economies that will grow the country. It's a paradox, especially with corruption. If you don't take the loan, the economy will stagnate. But if you take the loans and steal the money, corruption will grow and the economy again will stagnate. So when you do both corruption and debt repayments, both debt and corruption at the same time, it makes us, the people, suffer. We are fighting a two-front economic war. If you've read World War II history, you know that Germany loses a two-front war. Even though I'm not being literal, we are going to lose if we don't do something about it. Kenya's shift from concessional to costly commercial borrowing also raises exposure to global interest rates and currency swings. That's why the shilling is weaker than an old, blind, disabled woman. Studies recommend tighter fiscal management, better domestic revenue collection, debt transparency, anti-corruption, and manufacturing to build our economy. This leads to the government selling out to the private sector, which also hinders growth for higher returns. With an increased debt burden, the government increases taxes, which affects the low-income houses the most. And we are left with a vulnerable economy when we have these high debt levels, which increase our risk of distress and reduce our capacity to respond to economic shock. And all of these factors lead to the economy slowing down for countries with developing economies. This slow growth is basically death. This is a part of the neo-colonial project. With a slow-growing economy, we'll take on even more debt to grow the economy, and most of that debt is lost to corruption. So it's a never-ending cycle.